Welcome to another JSWIFT tutorial. Today we will be looking at the steps in applying for a pesticide import permit. Now this video is one of a two-part tutorial. In this video we will be looking at the application for pre-approval to import specific pesticides into the country. In our next video we'll be looking at the steps in obtaining a final pesticides import permit. So this first video will look at the pre-approval process. Now the first step is that you must be logged into the system. After you are logged in, then the next step is to navigate to the menu options and select permit, and your option is new. We are doing a pesticides import permit. So our regime type, we select import. Now we have 4 pages on our application, which is mostly standard for our JSWIFT permits. In our application, we will be completing 2 of the 4 pages, which we'll be completing the general information page and the item details page. Now let's first complete the general information page. Now we had import regime selected earlier. Our next step is to identify the process region, which is Kingston, and the process region is the location of the government office that will be processing this application. If we observed in the applicant details, we are seeing a company's name. Please note that this information is populated automatically. Now, if as an applicant you are tied to a company, whether as an owner or entity chief or as an employee, this information will be populated automatically from that initial registration process. So if you are representing your company and you are not seeing this information, I'd recommend that you close the page and see our tutorial on how to register as an employee or how to register as an entity chief, right? So those registration steps would have had to be done prior to doing this application. These boxes are not editable, those that are in gray, so you will need to do that registration if this information should be available for the permit. So the applicant details autofilled from registration. It's not personal, so we are not seeing the information as personal. However, if it was a personal application, then the option personal would be there, right? But we're representing our company, so we will not check the personal box. The next step is to enter the contact name. So who it is that is currently preparing this application. So John Brown, his contact number. If the Pesticides Control Authority wishes to reach you, what's that 10-digit number that can be used to reach you? The next step is the email address. So the correct email address that is tied to this business operation in this scenario would be entered. Now please know that the system will send notifications to the email that is tied to the user in the system. Right? If we notice as well, the importer box is filled in automatically. So if this person doing the application is not an agent for any other company, then the system will autofill the importer details box. Now, if this application was being done by an agent or a broker on behalf of a client, then they will have the drop-down list in order to make that selection from. So if you are an agent doing this application and you want to represent your client, meaning their name should appear on the import permit, then you need to close the page and do the agent services registration. Now, please note that the client will do the registration and the agent will approve that request to represent them in the system. Now, you can visit our tutorial video on agent services for those steps. Let's go back to our application. So considering that this person doing the application is not an agent, then the system will autofill the importer details saying that they are doing an application for themselves. What the client would need to, or the applicant would need to do, is to enter the name of the exporter, which is the company that they're buying with, that's sending the goods to them in Jamaica. So let me clarify the exporter details. Whoever it is that will be sending the goods to Jamaica, that is the exporter. Then take that bill of lading up and look at it. The name that will appear as the sender or the exporter on that document. Now our next step, after completing the exporter details, is to go to the item details page, which is the next page that we'll complete. But let's recap. On our first page, we selected the regime type as being import. We identified the process region, which is Kingston. The system autofilled the applicant and importer details. We had to enter our contact details. We had to enter the exporter details. Let's go to our next page. Now on our next page, which is the item details page, we'll be required to enter the specific details for the pesticide that's being imported. Now our first step is to identify the process type. So if we recall, process type, identify the type of permit that we are currently doing, which is a pesticides import permit. We select that option. And if you observe, when we selected the pesticides import permit option, we saw a second search appearing for our commodity. So we have two search options now available. The first search, we refer to that as a tariff search. This is basically a subset or a filter of the common external tariff. And what happens is that when you click on it, it will display commodities that are classified as pesticides, right? Or tariff codes that are associated with this process type. Next to it, we have our product search, and we recommend that the product search option is used to complete the application. Our product search option identifies the manufacturers, the commodities, and the packet sizes that are approved for specific pesticides that can be imported into the country. So when we click on product search, we'll have the commercial description, the manufacturers, the packet size, the categories of commodities that are deemed as pesticides, all available as search criteria options that we can choose the product that we are importing into the country. So let us click product search. Now, as we click product search, we notice that we have our criteria box appearing. Now, say for instance, I want to import a particular commodity. I can use any of these criteria options in order to search, but we will recommend to you that you will use the commercial description, and the commercial description would be the name of the product in this scenario that appears on the invoice. When I look on the invoice, this is the commodity name that I'm importing. Now, let's look how this works. Say, for instance, I am importing mosquito coils, and it is not case sensitive. We can use any case to complete the application, and I click search. The system will display to me all instances where whereby we can see these commodities. So we have all the different types of mosquito coils that are approved for import into the country. And as said before, we have the manufacturing company that is approved for this commodity, the country of origin, meaning with the country where the goods were manufactured. We have the active ingredient, the characteristics of the product. We also have the tariff classification, the approved packet sizes, and the registration numbers being displayed. Now, please note if while doing this application for a particular commodity you are not seeing the specific packet size, then you'll have to seek guidance from the Pesticides Control Authority. On the other hand, if there are multiple options in terms of packet sizes, you just need to verify on your documents what it is that you're importing and select the appropriate commodity from the list. You must select a packet size from the list once you're selecting from an already approved listing. If the information is not available for you to choose, then you can contact us at support@jswift.gov.jm, or you can contact the Pesticides Control Authority directly for guidance. Please note that depending on how specific your search is, say for instance I'd select let's clear, and I selected vape mosquito coils, and once I click search, you would have your item being filtered based on the selection. Once again, depending on what your search criteria is, what if I had bait and I click search, then all the possible options would appear for that commodity that I'm importing. Now I'm going to be selecting this particular product, which is the nylon granular bait, country of origin United States, active ingredient commodities granule, packet size 1.81. And my option is to select or choose. Now look at what happens when I select choose. Once I select choose, the system will display the commodity code based on what I chose, the description associated in the tariff with that commodity code, the commercial description, which is the name that appears on the invoice or the product. It will display the country of origin based on what I selected, and all these fields would have been auto-filled based on the selection made. The next thing that will be displayed is the manufacturer name based on the selection that was made. And if we scroll at the pesticides import details, we would have seen the characteristics granule being selected from the list that are of options available. Also for the packet size, we would have seen the packet size being 1.81 kilogram plastic bottle, like what I selected earlier. Our next step is to complete the form, entering the relevant data in the remaining boxes. So the next box that should be completed is the quantity box. And for that, I will use an example to complete the form. Please take a look at the example that is on the screen. Let's explore this scenario. Now, for the commodity that I'm importing, based on my scenario, I have 50 cases or boxes. In each box or case, I have 150 bottles. and each of these bottles weigh 1.81 kilogram based on the selection that I made earlier. Now, in order for me to find my total quantity, I would have to sum the total amount of the regulated commodity that is being imported. So we are really concerned about the total of that regulated commodity, which would be what is in each of that what is in each of those cases, or each of those bottles in those cases. So in all, if you total the number of bottles you have 7,500 bottles, which would be the 50 with 150 in each case. 150 times 50 is your 7,500. So the total number of bottles. So if you throw all the cases out and count the bottles, you get 7,500 bottles. And in those 7,500 bottles, we have that regulated commodity. And if each one of those bottles weigh 1.81 kilogram, then the total quantity of what we are seeking this permit for would be the sum of 7,500, which is each bottle, and the product that is inside, which is the number of bottles times the amount in each bottle. Or if you want to look at it by the cases, the number of cases, the amount in each case, multiplied by the weight of each item in the case, or each bottle. So if you notice, my total quantity in that scenario now becomes 13,575. Let's go over that once more. In my scenario, I have 50 cases of that bait that I'm taking in. In each case, I have 150 bottles of that regulated commodity, which is a bait, based on my scenario. Each bottle weighs 1.81 kilogram based on the scenario that we just did. Now, if I want to find out what the total quantity is, then I would need to find out the total amount of that commodity that is in the shipment, which would be the 50 cases times the 150 bottles, to find out how much was the total amount of bottles of this commodity that I have, and we would get 7,500 plastic bottles. And in these 7,500 plastic bottles, we have commodity weighing 1.81 kilogram, which is the regulated commodity. So your pesticides import permit is really seeking a permit to get permission to take in that total regulated commodity. That's the quantity. Not the quantity of the packages, but the quantity of the product, which is the bait in the plastic bottles. What's the total quantity? So if I should add up the kilogram bottle by bottle, in the end I should get 13,575 based on my scenario. Now please note, there are times when the commodity is not measured in weight. It could have been that this weight unit of measurement or statistical value is liter. It does not matter what this value is in terms of the statistical value. The formula for working this remains the same. Multiply the number of packages by, or the number of bottles or cardboard boxes, or whatever the case is, multiply the commodity by the number of packages, and you will get the answer. All right, so that is how the total quantity is worked out. You work the total quantity by summing up the total of that regulated commodity that is coming into the country. In my scenario, you can use either. I had 50 cases, each case with 150 product or plastic bottles, and then I got 7,500. Then I worked out the weight of the total amount of this product inside the packages that are being imported. So we have 50 times 150 plastic bottle times 1.81 kilogram. And please note that you will use this formula as is, and whatever the sum is that you get in terms of the numerical value, then you'll enter that on the application. So now that we have worked out our total quantity, we would now enter the 13575, which is the total amount that we got. So based on the data that you're using to prepare your application, you just work out what the total quantity of the regulated commodity is. Now, please note, you will observe that there's a statistical value that is attached to this field. Please do not do any conversion because you are not able to make any changes within this box. So if it is that the product is in liters, please be guided by the statistical value that is attached to the packet size, because that is the statistical value that will be used to guide the amount of the product that is allowed for import. So what the applicant is required to do is to work out the totals and just enter the details. Now, as we said before, the boxes in gray, you're not able to make any changes to them. So what you will do is that you will continue with your calculations as normal. Do not convert the totals that you have now worked out. The statistical value here in gray, you cannot change it. It is tied to the tariff code. So what you are required to do is just work your totals out and enter the total quantity. And we will see how that is represented with our pre-approval output document. Our next step is to identify the delivery terms. Now, the delivery terms will be based on the agreement between the seller and the buyer as to how the goods will get to destination, which is Jamaica. Now, if the arrangement is on the invoice at this point is cost, insurance, and freight, then you enter that. Or free on board, then you'd enter that. However, please note that the Pesticides Control Authority calculates the cess to be paid in CIF. So upon arrival, you may be required to submit documentation in order for the CIF to be determined. So say for instance, it is free on board. You only have the cost price. If that is the case, then you enter your delivery terms as free on board, and then you enter whatever your cost for this commodity on your invoice will be. And the currency is always US dollars. Now, say you had CIF, then you would enter whatever the CIF amount is. So you're required to enter the details based on the amount of information you have at the point of doing this pre-approval application. Our next step is to identify the supplier. Who it is that when I look on the invoice, that is the name I will see. The supplier is the company or individual that will be selling the goods to you, the importer, right? Or the person or company that will appear on the commercial invoice. So in this scenario, this is our supplier. And we got an error a while ago. So the system will be responsive, and the system will tell us, guide us along if there are any information that we have that is mandatory, it will be highlighted in red. All right. Once we have indicated any form of submission. Now our next step at this point, if you notice these boxes are in red, if you try to submit at any point or you click an enter button and any information is missing, then the system will identify the mandatory fields. And that is in keeping with ensuring that all mandatory fields are completed. So you just need to enter the relevant details as needed. Let's go to package size. In our scenario, we had package size of 7,500. We also had 50 cases being indicated. So if we know that the goods are coming in cases, 50 cases or 50 boxes, we can enter that information because this number of packages is referring to the shipped packages. However, if at this point you do not know what the shipped packages are, however, you know the total of the commodity you had ordered, you can just enter the packages themselves. So here we go, 7,500 pieces, which would have been my individual bottles that I'm taking in. Or if I already knew, as I said, the package size, I can enter that it is 50 cases, meaning the shipped packages, and both would be correct. The reason is that in this scenario, we are doing a pre-approval application, and for some applicants, you may not have the finer details. So this information may not have been readily available. However, what you must, however, ensure is that the quantity of the regulated product is correct. Now let's continue with completing the application. We are now at our manufacturer. The name was autofilled based on the choice that was made earlier. What we need to do is to enter the manufacturer name and address. Enter the name, United States. All right, because that was our country of origin. So we have the manufacturer details. So the system auto-filled the name, enter the manufacturer details. Now the manufacturer details would be the information on the product itself because it is a manufactured product. So when you look on that product, manufactured by, that would be the name of the manufacturer. That would be required here. If at the time of doing the application, the applicant does not have this information, we recommend that you find out from the supplier what this information is because the manufacturer details is a part of the mandatory information that is required. The next step now is to enter the pesticide import details. We had the granules being auto-filled from earlier where when we selected our particular bait of choice and package size. The intended use now would identify, is it for research? Is it for distribution? What is this? Is it a sample? Well, for my scenario, it is for distribution and resale. And the package size was already selected from earlier on in the application. Our next step now is to identify the storage address. Now, the storage address is that place in Jamaica where the goods will be stored. So we will enter that address. So now we have completed our application. Let's recap. We entered the commercial description. So we selected the process type. We used the product search to identify the product. We entered our commercial description, and then we went ahead and we chose the relevant option. We filled in the missing boxes. So we identified our total quantity of that regulated commodity, or delivery terms, or invoice value, or supplier details, packages, and manufacturer details. The intended use was not autofilled, so we entered that, and we also entered our storage address. Now you must select the option Add Commodity once you have completed all the fields. And please note that for the pesticides import permit, all fields are mandatory. Once you click Add Commodity, then the information will be displayed as seen on the screen. This will only happen if all the mandatory fields have been completed. Now, for the pesticides import permit in JSWIFT, you can add multiple items to one application. The important thing to note, however, is that when the application has been approved and printed, you will get one item per application, right, per output document. So you may have several item lines, but when you print your pre-approval document, you will get one item per document, and we'll see that later on. Now, in my example, I'll use 2 items. So our next item, we'll go through adding the second item. You can add a second item either by selecting the option Add New, and when you click Add New, it's going to take you back to the page like what I just completed earlier, and you select the process type, enter the code, select the proper commodity code using the product search option, and enter the relevant details. Or you can use the duplicate function to add your second commodity. Now the choice is yours based on what you're comfortable with. The duplicate, however, is useful especially for persons who you are importing the commodity and the supplier is the same, or majority of the information on each of the items are the same. So rather than entering the supplier details over and over for your 5, 6, 7, or 10 commodities, you can just use the duplicate feature and then edit and make changes to that field that is not the same. The next thing to note is that conditions under which you will be able to add multiple items to an application. Now, if it is the same shipment, please note that you can add multiple items if it is the same shipment. That's one. And a key point to note. If it is not the same shipment or it is a different exporter, you cannot add multiple items to the application. Where's the exporter details? Look on your general information page. This is the exporter details. If it is that it is not the same exporter, you cannot add multiple items to the same application. Let's go back to our item page. Let's assume that it is the same shipment, one shipment. We're going to now use the duplicate option. Remember, you can use either Add New or Duplicate to add additional item. I click Duplicate. What duplicate does, it replicates the selected line and allows you to edit. Now, at all times, you will have to edit. The reason is that the system does not store the values of items. Now, I'm going to change my commodity. Let's go to product search. We're going to use, maybe we could use our mosquito coils. Just showing you how to add. We search, select the choice that you want to make, click choose, and you close the box. The commodity is displayed, the country of origin is there. You work your quantities out based on the example earlier, and then you would enter the details. The value, just edit whatever is different. The next thing you'll be required to do is to identify the packages, boxes or cases, that's fine. You select appropriately. In my scenario, I said the supplier is the same, however, it's a different manufacturer, it's a different product. So we'll need to update that information. And then you enter whatever the province or parish is, and then we would complete or address the country. Once you're finished, the next recommendation is to quickly scroll to the top, review your pesticide form to make sure that the information is correct. And if it is not, then you may edit accordingly. So it should be the coils. So just review carefully to make sure that your information is correct. All right, so we did mosquito coils. So the reason for reviewing is to ensure that, and then you would make the corrections accordingly. So you'd go ahead and you would update whatever it is with the package size details. If the commercial information is different, then you would enter the relevant details. The reason for reviewing the form is in instances where the field is not populated, but under normal circumstances, all these fields would be populated accordingly. Once you have updated the fields, then you just need to save changes. Then click OK when you're done and close the box. Now, if you observe, our form is now completed with our 2 items. Quantity is there, product is there, country of origin. If there are additional products, then you would use either add new or duplicate to complete. Click next and navigate to the final page. Once all the mandatory fields have been completed, you will get the notification to say verification is successful, which is okay. And then your next step from here is to submit the application. There is no processing fee, so this application will go straight to our PCA officer for processing. Your reference number for your application is 2022 PER 158. Now you will wait for an email notification to say that your application has been pre-approved. And at that time, you will go ahead and search for the application and print. We'll demonstrate in the next slides. After the application has been submitted and approved, the system will automatically send an email to the applicant stating that the pre-approval has been granted. Now, with this in mind, the applicant would then log into the JSWIFT system, search for the application, and then print their pre-approval. Once the applicant has logged into the system, they will search for their application permit 2022 PER 158. Click search. The status is paid. Click view. Then navigate to the item details page either by clicking the word item details or clicking the option next. Once you're at the item details page, you will see a print all button. Once you click on that print all, it will download the PDF copy of your pre-approval. Now I'm using Chrome, so my document has downloaded to the bottom left. For other browsers, it may be a pop-up or some other signal that you'll receive. You open that document and here is your pre-approval. Now please note that, as I said before, that your pre-approval will be available with one item per document. So I had two items. I had the coils and I had the bait. And if you notice, I had two items, so I got two output documents to print. Also, just to recall, remember when I entered the totals of the commodities to be imported, I noted that the system will identify the statistical value for the approved package size, and it is the same thing that applies. So here we are at our output document. You can go ahead and watch our next video that speaks about, after the goods have arrived, what is required in order for payments to be made of the cess and for the final permit to be granted. Thank you for watching.